All right. Good morning. Let's call the meeting of the Water Commission of the City of Santa Barbara to order. Roll call. It looks like all commissioners are present and our council liaison. Welcome. Thank you. Any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Chair.
I don't see any speaker slips or any members of the public, so we will skip over that. Consent items, meeting minutes.
Move approval. Second?
First and a second, any discussion, questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Okay, let's jump into our administrative items.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, and we're here today to keep the SLIP discussion going. We've been working over the last few months, continuing to make progress. Still have a lot of work yet to do, but we wanted to bring this back and report out on some of the things that we've accomplished in the last couple months. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Ware, our Superintendent of Collections.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, Water Commission. I'm happy to be here today to provide updates to you on what we've been working on over the last few months. I know this is a very important topic for the public and also for the management of our collection system, and so we're here to inform you on the changes that have been made. So just kind of overview of the presentation. I'm going to discuss some of the website updates because we've been spending quite a bit of time getting that method of communication with the public up to what we believe is a much better standard. And also show you some of the upcoming events. We really believe that doing more public outreach will help get the message out and also be more available to the public. I'd also like to talk today about the new lateral connection repair solutions and fees that we were at Finance Committee on Tuesday, and so I'd like to update you on the status of that and kind of the next steps there. So, for the public outreach progress, we've really had two main initiatives over the last couple months, one of which is the website updates. And so I'm going to take us to the page in a second to show you all, but we have added a SLIP events page so that the public can see without us having to send out advertisements through Nextdoor or some of the other different methods we've been using. They can go on our webpage and see when maybe they could attend or how to get in touch with us. We also have been making updates to the repair solutions page because now that we have new options, there will be, the public needs to be aware of them. And then last but not least, our residential resources page. We have added the inspection and repair guideline forms and the CIPP, so cured in place pipe lining information. And we're in the process of working on a visual glossary that is kind of in its final review before we can get that listed on the residential resources page. So with that, I'm going to just walk you through kind of our website. So when you Google City of Santa Barbara Sewer Lateral Inspection Program, or SLIP, the good news is this comes up almost first now in Google, and it takes you to our SLIP landing page. And on the left-hand side, you can see that this kind of menu has grown over the last probably 6 months. We've been slowly but surely adding new pages. And so the first one I'd like to showcase is our SLIP events page. And so our staff are kind of maintaining a 90-day calendar of events that we're committed to attending. And so this will continuously be refreshed, but to show you a couple of the events we have coming up, next Thursday we will be meeting here to address our property management companies. So we've sent out an invite to many of the big property management companies in town to help them understand our sewer lateral inspection process and kind of the available repair solutions. And then the other two events that are currently on here that we have scheduled are our monthly availability sessions at El Estero Water Resource Center at 520 East John and Ollie Street. And below that, we also have some other ways that they can get in contact with us. So this SLIP workshop is that availability session. They can RSVP using the link, or they can also, if a neighborhood group or an HOA get some letters and they want more information, we invite them to contact us and let us know that we can, a convenient time that we can come out to them and either present to their HOA association or maybe the Riviera group or whatever it is. We want to be able to make a time that works well for both parties. And sometimes that isn't during office hours because people are working. And then last but not least, of course, they're welcome to schedule an appointment during office hours. And each of these links basically set up an email form that can be sent to one of our SLIP team members. Under the Repair Solutions page, because it's so dynamic right now, we are in the process of now not just leaving on here good practices for property owners to do when they're going through the repair process. We will be adding on option 1, option 2, option 3 for the lateral connection once those get finalized. And so staff have started drafting the language for that. And so there will be new edits to this page very soon. But the goal is really to continue with this kind of visual graphic explaining what are the different options. And then last but not least, the residential resources page. Originally, our residential resources were very limited, but we've been slowly but surely building out the library of the different informational handouts. And so each of these are links to the different types of informational pamphlets. And we will continue to develop those as we get more feedback from the public and we check in with our local stakeholders on what we can do to help them out. Before I go back to the presentation, are there any questions on the website?
So I'm just curious, as on that, not that one, but well, I don't know, it might have been that one where you start to talk about the alternatives that are becoming available. So how does someone get a good feeling out in the middle of the street, 20 feet down, on which one of those will be best, 1, and 2, which one you'll allow?
So first, we would invite them to have an open conversation with us so that we can walk them through kind of the things to consider that they might not be aware of. It would also be to explain the different lateral connection replacement options that we offer, and at that time also determine if there is any other lateral work on their lateral, because that would really steer a cost one way or another when it comes to either going with a plumber option with the city's contractor to do the wire replacement, or just having the city's general aid contractor go in and do the
I'm much
replacement.
more interested, let's just say it's a why issue on the choices of whys. So there's a replacement, total replacement, or there were some other options. People were coming into town with whatever, pulling a thing or a cure in place or a vinyl thing. So how do you know that those can be applied in any situation until you dig 20 feet down and open it up and look at it?
So that's exactly what the conversation with city staff can help with. We have access to our videos of the main line, and we also know if it's on a future capital repair project. And if it's on a near-term capital repair project where we have that specialized contractor, that would be an indication that maybe it would, if they can wait for it, they could potentially save some money if they can get grouped in with that bulk pricing on those what we call top hats or lateral seal devices.
All right. And are generally just a why. So the complaints I hear are whys. You know, you got to go down in the street. So are the newer technologies where you can sleeve it or something in place without digging the whole thing up, are those generally feasible?
For most people, yes. Okay. It really comes down to how is it going to impact long-term operations for us, since it would protrude into the main slightly, and we want to make sure that it's done in the right sequence.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. There we go. So there again is that table of the upcoming events for you to see. So one of the other efforts we've been working on is developing a focus group for all the materials that we've had a public outreach consultant help us develop. Those materials are currently in use, but we feel that we want to start getting feedback. And so one of the things we've done is we've started reaching out to external stakeholders and some of our internal city staff that specialize in maybe their different departments, community outreach, to participate in a focus group on October 30th. And so we feel we have a good blend of people, and we're sending out invites for that and the materials for them to review and putting together a small survey. And then at the focus group meeting, we're also going to be having more of a round-robin discussion on what do they think we can do to continue improving our materials to make useful for the public. And then after the focus group, once we have that feedback, we'll be going back to our outreach consultant to help us finalize those materials and then translate them to Spanish, because we recognize that there's a significant portion of the city that could benefit from it in Spanish, and also modify the version to be included in other types of public outreach forms, such as bill inserts or the Water Resources newsletter, city news and brief, those types of things that might not allow for a full one-page, two-sided PDF.
I think it's great you're translating to Spanish. I'm a native Spanish speaker. Please have someone that is a native speaker read it afterwards, just to make sure, because a lot of times the translations have things that don't make a lot of sense to a native speaker. So,
Point well taken. We have some internal city staff that are participating on that focus group panel too, so that they can help us translate, because I understand sewage doesn't translate very easily into Spanish from English.
It's interesting that you bring that up. This has been really pushing to try and improve our translations, and we actually have a test that folks can go through, and there's a pay associated with being at that. I forget what their certification levels of, but not just fluent, but being able to actually write as well, and those people can actually review the materials after we put it together.
So, as we've discussed at many of the previous Water Commission meetings, we have been working over the last several months to offer new solutions for our property owners when it comes specifically to the Y, or the connection to the main. And so on July 30th, we opened bids. We received, I believe, 3 bids from local general A contractors. And so the most responsive bid we moved forward with in August and September. We started developing the proposed fees and I'll go into a little bit more depth on what those fees include in a second. And then on October 15th, we went to Finance Committee to seek a recommendation to move to City Council. I'm happy to report that it was fully supported, and it was a great discussion as far as making sure that the information's out there clear. And then, so moving forward, we would be looking at going to City Council for adoption of those fees, with an implementation of hopefully early November if everything goes well. So to review kind of the quick slip repair process, a property owner receives a letter, one of the couple different ways they could, and after they inspect their sewer lateral, they submit it to the city. We review it, and we let them know if there's any repairs needed on their lateral and or the connection, and those are called out in kind of 2 separate lines. It's hard to see on the screen, but there are kind of 2 distinct lines there. One is talking about the lateral pipeline, and one is talking about the actual connection to the city main. And once they get that letter, they have basically 120 days to make the repairs. And there's an asterisk on there because we really want to indicate that if somebody is really making a good faith effort to try and make those repairs, we're more than happy to give them an extension and work through with them the different options. And so once they get that and they maybe go back to their plumber or they go and seek multiple quotes, the property owner comes down to making their decision on the repair solution. And I have on here 3 options, but there could be multiple different approaches from different contractors. They all have different equipment. So with the proposed fees, we have 3 kind of options that are out there now. The first one is kind of our status quo or our current practice, where, just speaking specifically to the lateral connection, a property owner could hire a local plumbing contractor appropriately licensed to excavate the pit over the connection, get that all ready to go. They can do any other work on the lateral, but they would need to have the city's general A contractor come in and replace that lateral connection. And so this picture here shows what a good lateral connection after the defective one has been cut out and a new one with Calder couplings is put on. The fee that they pay for that pretty much just covers the city's contractor to hop in the pit. There's a lot of other costs that the local plumbing contractor is going to charge in order to make that happen. But this makes sense if there's a lot of other lateral work that's necessary, because those other methods might require this pit.
Councilmember Friedman had brought up a question. He's like, when would someone use this? And a good example is if someone was pipe bursting their lateral, so the contractor had to build a pit at both ends, basically, to pull the new pipe in. He was already going to excavate here. Then this option would be something they would want to do, or as you'll see in option 2, it's a little more expensive, but then it's really focused on only if the Y needs to be replaced or the connection.
So once that Y is replaced at a set time and schedule, the property owner's private contractor can finish up any other pipeline repairs they have, and they'd backfill and restore the pavement. So moving into some new proposed options, and this is what the competitive bid that we spent June and July doing, is a sewer tap Y replacement with the excavation, all handled by the city's Class A contractor. So this is that kind of one all-inclusive item. And so I'll kind of discuss the fees a little bit more. But the idea here is that if a property owner is interested in this for the benefit of more of a fixed fee, or they want city assistance with executing this work and they don't want to have to go get 3 quotes and all the complications and time commitment there, the idea would be that they would sign our agreement and they would pay the applicable fee based on the knowledge we have at that time. And what that would do is that would trigger us to go out and locate that connection, because generally there's not there's no marking on the pavement until somebody goes out and does that. And so that would include our staff to go out and mark that connection. And at that time, we would schedule with our Class A contractor to go out and replace that within the next 30 days once everything's lined up. The other nice thing about this is this includes the inspection fees. So a lot of times property owners come to the front counter and they don't know what that cost is going to be until they get there and their contractor is figuring out what type of traffic control it's in, how deep the main is. A lot of different concerns kind of come up, and that can change the price. And so this is kind of a one lump sum fee that includes all that, which I think is easier to explain to property owners. The limitation here is that repair would only be for up to 8 feet deep, because we feel that a majority of the connections in the city on these collection lines are going to be up to 8 feet deep. There are some that are deeper, and for those, instead of having to get a bid price for everybody to assume that it's 12 feet deep, we capped it at 8 feet and then had an additional $600 per 4-foot depth. So that would come in after we've located the connection and we've determined how deep that lateral is. The property owner might need to pay an additional fee because it is deeper than that 8 feet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does this also apply when I think we have a lot that go between county lines and city lines, and that adds an extra complication? Is this the option that would be helpful with that too, to streamline the communication between the county and the city?
Absolutely. So this is one that, again, you get city project management with. And so we would help with that communication. We would help with the locating and really determining, is it in city or county, or is it in the roadway, or is it on the side of the road? All those things that sometimes are difficult to understand from the property owner standpoint.
Very good. Thank you.
I will revisit that point too on the next slide, because there might be another alternate option there too.
So something falls apart in this process. You pay the fees up front, right? And then you start the construction, and for whatever reason, your Class A contractor flakes out and doesn't show up for a week, and the homeowner is left without any functioning plumbing. How is the homeowner protected in this particular case? Because they paid up front rather than they control the plumber, and if that plumber doesn't show, they don't pay him. They get another plumber, they get the job fixed. But in this particular case, they could be sitting there without a habitable residence.
So with our construction contract with the general A contractor, we have certain terms in there that they have to meet. And one of the terms is once we've assigned it to them, they have 30 calendar days to complete. They can complete it at any given time during that time frame, but generally they're going to be very incentivized to excavate, get the repair made, and backfill and pave generally the same day. They move pretty quickly. So the downtime for a property owner would probably be, they'd be notified 72 hours in advance that the contractor was going to be at their residence doing the repair. And the day of, they would probably be without, they would be asked to minimize their water usage. No, they wouldn't have to stop using water usage, but they'd be asked to minimize it because there would be people working in a trench at their connection. If that becomes an issue, we have a project manager and an inspector that would be on site and would be working with moving that contractor along. So
This would not drag out. I mean, we want to get these things backfilled, street opened. This isn't going to be something that takes multiple days.
Well, I just, if it was me and I had control, I'd say, of course it wouldn't, because it'd be like the golden rule. I have the gold, they need it.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, if I paid my fees up front, I've kind of given that control away to whatever could happen.
So,
right?
so the fees have been paid, but the contractor has been paid. So the city holds that. They have to complete the work or they don't get paid.
Okay.
So we are basically acting as an agent. Yeah.
Is there more than one contractor that you use?
It's currently,
We only have one contractor right now, but we have multiple mechanisms if there was an issue, like, for example, somebody had a situation where their lateral was in such a condition that they couldn't use their plumbing. We have an emergency basis that we could go out and do that.
All right.
And at least if they paid their fees, that would cover the cost of us going out on an emergency basis to
Okay.
do it.
Thanks.
Hi, Amanda Flessy, a wastewater manager. I also want to add, our contracts have liquidated damages associated to them. So that's another benefit for our contracts, because most plumbing contracts do not have liquidated damages, and to get a plumber out there, you're really at their schedule. And that's not the case with our city-run contracts. So we do have, we're not paying our contractor up front, so we have that aspect of it, but we also have liquidated damages for them to complete the work.
and I think the other benefit that a customer has with this is that they are kind of being pulled together. So if there were, for example, some oddity with this, there isn't going to be a change order that goes along with this, aside from the depth issue, which we will know before we dig the hole. But to that extent, a contractor gets in there and there are issues. Those are stuff that we have worked out in our contractor, and the homeowners kind of kept whole, whereas they have a private plumber get in there and there's stuff that could be change ordered on those issues.
And the other part of this option is it also gives them one alternate cost to compare against the other costs that they're getting from their plumber. So they might still elect to go with the plumber, and that's perfectly all right. So the third option we're pretty excited about is another one that has been brought to us from some external stakeholders that feel, there is this economies of scale, and if the city is doing a good job of planning, we could probably also line these up and utilize a trenchless method. And so that would be option 3. And so what we did is we took the cost of what our current construction contracts have for installing what we call a top hat or a lateral seal device. They generally are a lot more reasonable than excavating in the right-of-way, because you don't have to do any excavations. You don't have the excavation, the backfill, the paving, all the other things associated with it. These devices, and there's 2 pictures up here. One is how the device is installed in the lateral, and the other one is the after product. Basically are installed through manholes. The ideal time to install these is after we've lined a main, because if we line the main and that lateral still has some roots and annular space around it, the top hat or lateral sealing device can be put in and seal that and prevent those roots and any infiltration from coming back afterwards. So the fee that was proposed covers the cost of the lateral connection sealing device at the time the sewer main is rehabilitated, because we have that specialized contractor in town. And it's also assuming that we're not doing one. They're not coming in for an entire capital project and only doing one top hat. They're generally getting several or some years 100 installed, and so they're using their crews appropriately, and that's how we can get a better price for those lateral sealing devices. Then to have a property owner contract with one of these companies out of LA and have them come up for one at a time. The caveat here, though, is that it really can only apply to laterals located on current or near-term sewer main rehabilitation capital improvement projects, because it is about that specialized contractor. However, as we go through all these options, we're going to be evaluating them, and if they're and adjusting, and if there are ones that seem to be panning out more or more successful for our property owners, we can explore the option of maybe doing other types of contracts to help with this. But at this point in time, we feel that tying it to the capital program is the quickest and best benefit for our property owners in the short term. So the idea with this would be, as we schedule a sewer main for rehabilitation, we would be sending out a special letter to the property owners, especially for the ones that we know already have a defective connection, saying you've been identified as somebody who has a defective connection, and if interested, this is the process. Please speak with a SLIP representative, and we can walk you through this, because it could save you, significant money down the road.
Quick question. So is the life expectancy similar for this versus the other option 2, let's say?
So for these lateral sealing devices, They are made generally from the same material that our cured in place pipe is, and they're installed in a very similar fashion. And it's an inert material, and so the design life of these is generally 50 years. People don't want to go ahead and advertise that they're longer than 50 years, but they're inert. So if everything goes well, they'll be in the ground long after many of our houses are probably still standing.
Right before the meeting, we were talking about PFAS and all these inert materials, and I just wonder what inert really means. But okay.
And so the
Non-sewer corrosion. Yeah.
that was the one that you called that the top hat one, right?
Yeah.
So that's not a one-off option. That would only be available when you're relining a main.
Correct. Right now, what we've been looking at is as we're scheduling our capital now 2, 3, 5 years out and working with the streets overlay projects, we're trying to get the message out that this is an option for you, and it might come 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, but that the best time to do that would be after it's lined. If, for example, you needed to do it before the pipe is lined, we could make an exception for it, but the cost might not necessarily be the advertised cost here. The fee is really
The way they get in there, there's some efficiencies when you're doing your work.
after it's been lined,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thanks.
So the this additional fee that we included and we got a bid price for was a fee to replace an additional connection unexpectedly encountered or in close proximity to another connection that's in the pit. And so what we run into quite a bit in the field is 2 lateral connections, maybe for different sides of the street, right in the same, exposed at the same time. And at that point, that's probably the best opportunity for the property owners to kind of split the cost and save quite a bit of money. So the way we see this working is if one property owner goes and selects option 2, exposes it, or even they go option 1 and their plumber's already exposed that pit, if their neighbor is aware and their lateral connection is within that pit, they could pay an additional $450 per connection, regardless of the size of the main, in order to have that connection made at that time. And if they're good property owners and they're good neighbors, they could talk about, well, there was some cost associated with getting that pit open, but ultimately you're looking at if it's a $5,000 fee and you've got a $450 additive there, now property owners are splitting $5,400 or $5,450 instead of each paying $5,000 because it doesn't make sense to open 2 pits in the exact same spot. So here's the table of the proposed fees that we discussed with Finance Committee on Tuesday. I added a column to kind of show what is the current FY20 fee that's in place right now for only option 1 because that's the only one available. And so option 1 with the ability to replace an already exposed connection, either on a 4 or 6-inch lateral to a 6-inch or 8-inch main, it's $952. That's what the fee just for that is at the front counter. By going out to bid, we were actually able to lower that cost down to $895. So our property owners will get, assuming we approve these fees, property owners will get some additional relief even if they go with option 1. And it's $995 if the connection is on a 10-inch or greater main. And that really is because it's rare, but sometimes it happens. And what that means is we may have to have additional staff available to handle flows for the contractor because 10-inch mains and greater are going to have additional flow. They're going to be more of a trunk main, not a collection main. So for option 2, we've got three parts to it. The first is, this is that all-inclusive. For a 4 or 6-inch lateral connection to a 6 or 8-inch main, our proposed fee is $5,000, and that includes the cost to do all the work, also the city project management time, and also locating the connection in the roadway, and all inspection fees and everything kind of all in one, up to 8 feet deep and a 4-foot-long trench. For a 4 or 6-inch lateral connection to a 10-inch or greater sewer main, it'd be $5,500, again, because of that additional handling of flows. And then last but not least, if connections are greater than 8 feet in depth, that's the $600 per 4-foot depth. And generally, that'll be kind of applied across the city. Where that gets a little sticky is when a lateral connection's in a hillside or there's something really unique engineering-wise about where they're going to be excavating. And so our contractors already expressed a little concern about that, but we feel that with the city working through it with them, that we can come to a resolution on those connection locations. And then for this option 3, the lateral connection rehabilitation option, the fee is proposed to be $1,500. So with that concludes what I wanted to present to you today, and I'm more than happy to take any questions or.
I just wanted to add a little bit more to that is some of the stuff that we're still working on. So staffing. So we've significantly reduced the number of letters going out right now so that we can retool and work on pulling this stuff together. But eventually we need to get back to sending those letters out again. And hopefully we'll be in a much better position to doing that. We have been working internally on a staffing plan on what level of staffing we need to be successful, and we'll be proposing that to the city administrator, and hopefully it's out of practice, but to try and see if Water Commission and Council would support some type of mid-year staffing change, which is not something we typically do, but I think given the urgency of wanting to make this program successful, I think it may be applicable. So we'll take a look at that. And then in 2020, we'll also be talking about the frequency, revisiting the program. We do, as you recall, have a 10-year program to see all commercial, which includes multifamily, but we do not currently have a frequency established for residential. So that's another one on our list to do. And then we're also working still on funding options. Krista Pleiser from the Realtors Association reached out to us. She sent us some stuff on some recent regulations that allow, still trying to understand this. I haven't talked to our finance manager about this, but creating, allowing cities to create their own banks, which could potentially facilitate low interest loan opportunities. I may be reaching that is exactly what it was intended for. It may be just so that you can do money with the marijuana sales. I don't know, but it sure had a lot of support from local banks to do that, and I don't know if that will be another option for us. But again, we're still trying to explore the financing element of it. So with that, we're here to answer any questions.
So many questions. But actually, I want to talk about the funding, but the rate sheet you had up there, I'm done for $5,000, right? If it's 8 feet or less, I mean, that is such a huge gain over the complaints I see on Nextdoor, let's say, where one guy charges 15, the other guy charges 6, the next guy charges 8, the other guy charges 4. So I wrote down financing, but I'm not too, whatever. For me, that's a huge gain in the lack of financing question, because it's $5,000, and that doesn't seem like an arm and a leg. Now, I realize that will be an arm and a leg to some people, and I'm still interested in having you aggressively pursue an answer to somebody for financing, and my 2 cents would be that it'd be on some type of income-reliant qualification, not Mike Jordan going down there and getting his whatever used to be with Creeks for $2,000, and now my $5,000 there. If I can afford that, I should be able to pay that. And if you can't afford that, then there should be a program that helps with that. So I think that's super. The option 2 is what you talked about. There was only 3 respondents, and you picked 1, right?
Yes, our most responsive was based on the total bid price for all the items that were included.
Any concerns that only 3 wanted to play? I mean, it just seems like a low number in a town full of plumbers and landscapers.
So the limiting factor there, I believe, is the number of General A contractors in town.
Okay,
so
classification of
okay. Contractor classification. So we actually got a new bidder that we haven't gotten in the past. But we do recognize there were probably a couple Class A contractors that did not elect to bid. And so when we revisit this in a year, 2, 3 years, depending on how successful this is, we would be trying to figure out how do we continue keeping it open, competitive, so that our property owners get the best price.
Okay. So I can't congratulate you enough where you've been. I've been pretty agnostically cup half empty supporter of this so far, because I was anticipating that number would come in like 10 or 15,000, and you'd just see the horror that you've already seen online kind of thing. So whatever you've done to get to there is really deserves congratulations. And just for me personally, it will actually turn me into much more of an advocate publicly and with some of these groups like you mentioned, rather than just kind of standing back and waiting how this works out. I think you guys have done a really good job. So.
Oh, I just had a question too about the pricing that we did get. Like, what's the term of the contract we have with the contractor, and how long is this price good for? Like, I know it's probably, inflation's gonna boost that up in a couple of years, but are we kind of locked in at that rate for the time being, at least?
Yes. So our purchase order that we have with the contractor is good for the rest of the fiscal year. So this would carry us through June 30 of 2020, which at that time we would need to do a new purchase order, and that would kind of open up the discussion for adjusting the fees. We've seen in some years they go up based on different things that the contractor has to deal with, like labor rates. In some years it stayed stagnant or actually gone down because they recognize that something's changed, and maybe we could get it to come down if we negotiate with them at that time. The way we've handled this in the past is we've done annual ones with the option to renew up to a certain number of years, and then we may extend it all the way out to the full 4 years if it's going well of renewals. If not, we would decide to go out to bid and restructure the bid in order to, again, get our property owners the best solution to make it a beneficial program.
The way the program was also set up, the homeowner has provided a warranty with the service as well, and that we had the attorney's office been working on the language that the warranty is between the contractor and the homeowner, so that he's not pulled into those kind of things. But certainly, if there's something wrong with that, they would be provided the same warranty that the city would provide if the contractor was working just on our infrastructure.
Thank you. I just want to make the additional comment. Really want to commend you for the hard work on this, especially with the public outreach and your availability after hours to neighborhood groups, the workshops, and then the fixed fee. You've really taken a lot of the anxiety out of this whole process when a person gets this letter and they don't know how much is it going to cost, how to coordinate everything, what to do. And you've really addressed all of those really above and beyond. So just an extra in addition to our fellow commissioners, that thank you.
Any final questions, comments?
Oh, I had one question. I noticed you guys had a meeting last night. Did you get anybody to attend? How'd that go?
We did have a meeting last night. We're asking the public to RSVP, and when they don't, we leave kind of one person there in order just in case anybody does show up. And we did have somebody show up and got some information very quickly, and that was the only one we received last night. So we've had some good success. We've had days where we've gotten multiple people coming in, and I think they've been very appreciative that we're available after hours. And we've had other days where nobody RSVPs, and so what we're looking at is how do we advertise this more? And it's a trade-off, really, because it could turn into quite a few people if we don't set up some kind of RSVP process. We don't want people to have to wait. So I think the other idea, too, is us going out and pushing information to people and going out and meeting with their neighborhoods. They can kind of assemble their own meeting time, and we can go meet with them at that time and get multiple people out and maybe more of a comfortable environment for them, not coming to a facility in the Funk Zone.
Well, I'll echo Councilmember Stenden's congratulations and thanks for gratitude for all the work that you and your team have done. This is wonderful, and very excited that our community has this resource. So thank you so much. And it looks like you are on deck for the next one as well.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, this item is somewhat new. We usually do an annual report, but we've slight twist to the consent decree. We're doing a semi-annual report. And again, this is the last year of the consent decree, so we're not going to focus a ton on that, really getting focused on all the great work that's getting done. I think what we had always envisioned coming out of this program is I think personified today. When you'll see the results, it's really coming to fruition, and I think we can kind of be looking now ahead of the next hurdle, which is the laterals. This is where we'll be taking some of that focus.
All right. So, as Josh mentioned, we're going to be talking about our semi-annual report today. To go over a few things prior to beginning the presentation. First off, the picture on the right is all of the dedicated men and women who are helping make sure that we live in a nice, clean environment, and that sewage goes to exactly where it's supposed to, Ellis Terra Water Resource Center. So I'm very proud of that picture. I also want to just give you a brief overview of kind of our SSO performance and talk a little bit about how did we get to a semi-annual report with the consent decree. Also talk about the status of the sewer main maintenance programs and all the work we've been doing. And so when you see our trucks driving around every day, to give you a little bit of idea of how is that progress going. And then leave you with some future reports that we're going to propose so that we can keep this conversation going and keep the public informed on what their wastewater rates are going to.
SSOs, again, are sanitary sewer overflows, basically our spills.
So the semi-annual report was added as added into the consent decree amendment that was executed in 2017. It's called the 2016 consent decree amendment because we started negotiating. But one of the things that was highlighted was the need for more than just an annual report. And so we have a reporting requirement that we are required to report all of our data from January 1 to June 30 on September 30th, or October 1st, the report has to be mailed out. And so we thought this would be a good meeting to update you on how does that report look. And so to go over a couple of the elements that are in the report, we have a section that discusses our SSO performance, sanitary sewer overflows. So we provide spill data, we provide the cause, and we discuss a little bit about what we do in order to prevent those from happening again. We provide a cleaning report and a frequency change report to channel keepers that explain how did our cleaning go over the first 6 months. We also provide condition assessment data. Our planner scheduler for our CCTV program is busy all year making sure that he reviews our CCTV data to ensure that it meets all of PACP standards, Pipeline Assessment Certification Program standards. And he also has to look at the contractor's work. And so that's a big deal because they're motivated by money and they want to keep moving. And so I'll talk a little bit about the numbers that we have for that. And then last but not least, there was a major focus in the amendment on making sure that we can document our training program. Our staff do a lot of training weekly and biweekly at safety meetings, but specifically the overflow emergency response plan and our field audits. And I'll detail those out a little bit more. So here is the table of our SSO standards since the beginning of the consent decree. You can see that the number dropped over the first few years, and then we've been at 8 for the last 4 calendar years now since 2016. On the right-hand side, you'll see our actual spills, and you can tell which years we made the spill goal and which years we did not. I'm very proud to showcase those last 2 years because it really shows that our programs that we put in place are starting to take hold, and we're getting benefit out of them. Oh, and that 3 down there at the bottom is so far because obviously calendar year 2019 is not over yet, but you can see where it stacks up as far as previous years. So to look at it in a little different perspective, here are the spills, our spill counts since 2008 prior to the consent decree, and then 2012 after the consent decree was executed. Our average for the last several years has been 13. In order to get there, we implemented several different programs, and we're going to talk about the data for those. But those programs really focus on the cleaning and condition assessment and capital for our system. And so the little green mark there on 2017 is to show that 3 of the 13 spills we had that year were during the February 2017 storm event, and that was a storm that came in that exceeded our design capacity for our system. So anything in excess of a 10-year frequency, 24-hour duration storm does not count towards the consent decree spill performance. So that year we had 13 total, but 10 only were counting towards our spill count. So how are we doing this year? We've had 3 spills so far this year. We had our first one in January. It was due to roots. We believe it was roots from a private plumbing contractor right after a rain event. So somebody pushed down roots, and we had a plug that was about 2 feet long that made it down the system and found a nice spot to block, and we had a spill. March 2019, we had roots coming in at a joint, and so that was our second spill of the year. And then in April, at the end of April into May, we had a structural issue, an offset joint that caused exfiltration, and ultimately we had to report that as a spill. So we're at 3 spills for the year, and that's the breakdown. This is a graph that may look familiar as far as an annual report, but one of the, rather than just benchmarking against ourselves on our history of our spills, it's also good to look at how do we do in relation to the other municipalities within the state of California and within our region. So Santa Barbara is located within Region 3. I believe there are 9 regions, State Water Resource Control Board regions. And so when you look at the average, and I took 2018's numbers just so you could see a full year, the average number of spills per 100 miles, a pretty standard way to evaluate your spills, the state is at 12.9. The local Region 3 municipalities are at 11.4 spills per 100 miles. This year, through the first half of 2019, we're at 1.5. If you look at it from last year, we're also significantly under the 2018 amount as well, too. We would be somewhere around 2 to 3. So this is another way that we can be benchmarked across several other agencies. And I added the source, which is CWIX. That's our state reporting database. It's open to the public, too, so anybody can go and get this information and compare us against the remainder of the state. But I think it really showcases that no matter how big your system or small your system, you can be compared against one another, and it can be apples to apples, and therefore we are significantly better than where we were about 10 years ago. So we can't have a meeting without, again, going back to the private sewer laterals. So to show our data through September of 2019, we have had 26 private sewer lateral discharges that our staff have responded to. Again, these are the ones we're aware of and we've spent resources responding to. And so while these are smaller spills, because they are generally coming from only one residence, they still are something we report into that CWIX database, and we feel that by supporting the SLIP program, we can help maybe reduce these from ever happening again at these residences. And if we can get proactive about the SLIP program, maybe prevent future ones. So looking at the various sewer system maintenance programs, each one of these programs has professionals underneath them that support making sure that we meet the goals that we set forth at the beginning of the year and throughout the year. And so I just wanted to list kind of all the ones we do, and I'll talk about a few of them. But the pictures in front of you, the little device that you see on the ground next to the operator, that is our acoustic sounding device that we use kind of as an insurance policy now. The technology was developed to help agencies figure out where to clean. It uses sound, sending it from one manhole to another. And if it gets a poor score, it says you got a blockage or something in there. If you get a good score, the idea is it's clear and you can move on to the next. So we now use this as part of our cleaning program, but more of as an enhancement to the cleaning program. We don't go out and do a lot of acoustic as much as we were doing before, but we test mains that we're not cleaning this year. So we kind of use it as our insurance policy. The picture on the right is of one of our operators using one of our combination vacuum jetter trucks for our cleaning program. So looking at our data halfway through 2019, as far as our cleaning mileage, we reported that we cleaned 164 miles of sewer main, which is roughly staff completed 3,875 cleaning events. That's a lot of data for our cleaning planner scheduler to go through, but it's important because it shows that we're getting a lot of cleaning accomplished with the same number of crews we've had over the last several years. Projecting that out, we're going to be somewhere around the number of miles that we were at in 2018. And our average over the last several years has been 246, but of course the last two years have been pulling that number up. So another common way to look at our cleaning mileage is not how busy are staff out there just running around cleaning the same pipe, but how much of the system are they cleaning? So out of our 6,400 pipes that we have out there, what percentage of the pipes are cleaned? And so this number of 128.1 geographic cleaning miles through the first half of the year shows that out of a 251-mile system, we've cleaned approximately half of it, which is good. And we would expect that number to go up quickly through the first half of the year, but as we get to new pipe through the remainder of the year, it will at some point kind of top out. But last year we cleaned 186.5 miles of the system, which is roughly 80% of our system. That had never been done before. And we think that is a big reason why our spill counts are lower. So one of the other major programs that we spend quite a bit of our operations time on is our CCTV program and condition assessment program. And so the picture on the left is of our CCTV vans set up in the roadway, and this is what it typically looks like. And they insert a camera in the main through a manhole. And we use a national standard from the National Association of Sanitary Sewer Companies. It's called Pipeline Assessment Certification Program, and it's a 0 to 5 scoring system. 5 being the worst defects, meaning the pipe has failed at least in one spot. 0 being the pipe doesn't have any structural defects. And there's a structural score and a maintenance score. And so far for the first 6 months of 2019, staff and contractors had completed 15.4 miles of CCTV assessment. You can see the numbers for 5 and 4, meaning pipes not in great condition, somewhere hovering around the 9-mile mark. Contractors had completed 5.1 miles of that 15.4 because we had an on-call contract at the beginning of the year that we had a contractor coming up and helping meet our reinspection demands. So PACB 5s and 4s need to be reinspected at certain frequencies in order to make sure that those defects don't get worse and cause a spill. And so we typically see high numbers of 5 and 4 because we need to continue reinspecting them on a pretty aggressive frequency. So once we've condition assessed it and we've assigned it a structural score, those numbers go into our computerized maintenance management software and another software that we have called InfoMaster. And we use that to help prioritize our capital projects. And so this chart shows the mileage of repairs, rehabilitation, and replacements since the beginning of the consent decree, so 2012. For the first 4 years, we had a high-risk pipe or an exfiltration abatement part of our program, and we had to do 2 miles of that, plus our typical 1% capital replacement goal, so replacing the system once every 100 years. In 2017, when we amended the consent decree, we dropped that target down to 3.56, and we've been hitting that ever since 2017. So through the first part of 2019, we've done 1 mile, and our capital program is in full swing right now, and you'll probably see contractors out in the field using a piece of equipment like what you see in front of you, or you'll see steam coming out of a manhole, and that's them performing cured-in-place pipelining. And so we're on track to meet our 3.56 goal by the end of calendar year 2019. And 5.1 miles has been kind of our average over the last several years. And there's our new goal. So the other part of the report that we provided is our training documentation. In order to ensure that our field crews are not just running around cleaning the way they want to clean, we have field audits where our supervisor and our lead will go out and review how their procedures are going and also safety. And through the first half of 2019, we reported that 203 field audits were made by our supervising team. We also are required on an annual basis to do SSO emergency response plan training, where we review the containment and control procedures with staff, the documentation needed in order for us to report that to CWICS. And then in order to supplement that classroom training, we also do 2 emergency response drills a year where we go out and sometimes we'll just chalk outline kind of what a spill would look like, and we call staff in, not telling them that it's not a spill, so they show up, and it's kind of fun to see them in the fireman kind of role, show up, and they have to start immediately responding to it, and then we make them practice their documentation, data collection, walk through all the procedures. And I think this is important because with the staff we have, we don't have a lot of long-standing staff anymore. We've kind of had this turnover, and a lot of our staff were not here when we were having the years of 40 spills where they were responding weekly. So in order to keep these skills fresh, just like firefighters and police, they do drills, and this is our type of emergency response drill. So the picture on the right shows we picked a quiet cul-de-sac, took a 5-gallon bucket of water, which is one way of us estimating spill volumes, and put it on the pavement, and they were expected to kind of take the measurements and do the calculations. So we reported that to Channel Keepers as well as part of our semi-annual and annual reports. So lastly, I also want to just present a couple other notable activities that we've done in 2019. As you're probably well aware, the summers these days in Santa Barbara are filled with construction. Everybody seems to be doing their capital projects. Streets is doing theirs, Water's doing their water main replacement, and we are also doing our sewer main rehabilitation projects. And so one of the things we've been really striving to do is how do we better coordinate within the city? We're all within Public Works. We feel there's a good way we can do it. And using Cartograph OMS, which is our computerized maintenance management software, we've been able to do that. And so it's really starting to the rubber's starting to hit the pavement because we're looking at future capital projects and deciding whether do we move them up in order to get ahead of streets or do we defer them because it's not as high priority as other things. And so we're really trying to maximize our budget as well as getting the work done in the right way possible as much as we can. And then also we've utilized Cartograph OMS to transition our field operators inventory. So we have a couple storage sheds that have all this inventory over the years that it's been managed in a couple different ways, and we feel that by putting it into Cartograph OMS, we can do a better job of managing that, and so our field staff have committed quite a bit of time to get that transitioned into Cartograph.
I just want to say that Brad is a powerhouse on this CMMS. He's really taken off. In fact, a lot of others come to him for information on how to do it, but he has really embraced it early on, and really been pushing this coordination issue with streets and trying to get all of our assets. Again, there will always be some conflicts out there, and unfortunately, I hope that is the community will have built the trust of the community that 99% of the time we are catching these, but there will always be the things that there's always some nuance that we don't catch. But we have done a lot with this software and with Brad's help to try and identify where everyone's planning to be in the next 3 to 5 years so that we can try and head off as many of those issues and, of course, appear and are coordinated with trying to accomplish all this work because there is a lot going on in the right-of-way right now.
Yes. And so with all the things we've learned from the sewer lateral inspection program, we haven't just thrown all of our eggs and all of our effort into updating that website. There are multiple programs that help with reducing spills, and so in order to inform the public on what our staff is out there doing all the time, we've also been working on our website, our wastewater collection website, to include a page for cleaning and operations, condition assessment, and the CIP page, so that the public can be informed on when is the capital improvement project going to be in their neighborhood, as well as if I see a CCTV van in my neighborhood, am I going to get a sewer lateral? And so the idea is if we have some additional pages that somebody lands on to understand more about why they're getting a letter, like on a condition assessment, it also links them back to SLIP and vice versa. SLIP page can link them over here to understand more of the why are they getting a letter, not the why connection to the city sewer main. And one of the things I realized coming in from the engineering side into the operations side is that we use a lot of technical terms, and when we respond to emergencies, it's not always just for a private spill or a public spill. Sometimes it's for a noisy manhole frame and cover, and that's a nuisance, especially on a Friday night and you're trying to get sleep and you have a noisy manhole. We want the public to have a one-stop place so they can quickly get that resolved, not have to go hunt around or call a bunch of different numbers. We're trying to help them out with that as well too. And so we really think the website is going to be a very important tool for us moving forward, and so we're investing on that side of my programs as well, not just on the SLIP program. So, as Josh mentioned earlier, the consent decree is scheduled to be to end March 31st of 2020. We also have a term in there that says it will end if we have 2 consecutive calendar years under 8 spills. So we are on track for that as well too. With that said, we would have one more presentation we'd make to the City Council. Same format we've done in the past where we explain kind of the things we have to explain. But we do feel that this kind of forum is a really important thing for the public to be able to hear all the things that we're doing for them. And so we would kind of expect that in future years we would find a good time to report on all the programs and how the budget is supporting our goal to keep eliminating spills in the city of Santa Barbara. So with that kind of concludes the presentation.
Mr. Davis.
I have a comment, not a question. One, really good work, Brad. I'm really impressed with the presentation and was pleased also to see the results and the curve of where it's going. All of us see the vacuum trucks in the street and whatever. I'm wondering, is Channel 18 doing any features on these programs? Because, I just know people channel surf and they run across this stuff, and it actually penetrates a lot more than you know. I'm just curious whether we're on their schedules to get some spotlight on the good work that you're doing.
So far to date, I have not heard they plan to do any of that, but we do feel that video is an area that we need to explore more and get more of our information out using, some city TV videos hosted on our website. I know other agencies that are bigger, they have more resources for public outreach and public relations, and they have their own kind of channels on YouTube that you can go on and see this, and I think that's a well-taken point as far as getting...
Some of us can lobby for you to basically see if we get on that schedule for Channel 18.
I think we're also going to try to do, we're getting a new Vector truck. And so hopefully for the next meeting, we'll be able to bring that outside, at least towards the end of the meeting, be able to break and go check that out. It's a pretty impressive piece of equipment.
Just final comment. I just think that the public, water and wastewater are two areas that the public have no idea. They just take it for granted. And again, video today basically can touch a lot of people. So I, for one, will lobby anybody I can at council and administration to move this up, because I think it's really important. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Okay, I'll second that, and I'll confess I don't know which one it was, whether it was Water District or Sanitary, but grandkid came home last weekend or the weekend before on Dinosaurs in Water event out there. You guys aware of this? Mm-hmm. So pretty big deal for kids, really fun. One of the messages he brought home, of course, happy to tell me, was that the water's been around since the dinosaurs that we're using, right? And so that's all I know. But my daughter came home and said it was really cool, too. And this kind of goes back to, when does the city have the resources to kind of have a shared PIO or marketing person, right? So you don't have to bear it. But I agree with everything Dave said. That's just part of the issue. I have a working phrase for that I've been using, because you'll want to hear this, because this goes back to all kinds of people I've met who have PE after their name. And that's our function is we work as water professionals first and people second. And we really need to turn that around and work as people first who happen to be water professionals. That's kind of how you get out of that box and put yourself in the customer's frame of reference or the public's, even though you have that education. So I don't know, it's just some stupid flippant little phrase I'm using. But if you needed help working on something like that down at El Estero, essentially where you're going to draw like that and it's a family-based event and you're going to work on the One Water thing, it would seem to me that we'd have 3 to 6 groups in town, some of them who complain, some of them who don't, but should put their support behind that also and join in with the city to do that type of event or events. So.
Thank you. And then one final comment. I really thank you for coordinating the streets, water, and sewer. I know at council that's a question that keeps coming up. How can these be coordinated? Members of the public are always commenting on that. Like the street's torn up one time and then it's torn up multiple times for each of these issues. So that long-term planning coordination is really appreciated and efficient.
Great job. This is fantastic. What's the annual budget? Okay.
Commissioners, Malcolm Hamilton, Administrative Analyst. The operating budget's approximately $19 million for the wastewater fund, and they have about a $4.5 million capital program.
Okay. Other questions, comments? No? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Can I make one correction?
course.
The new recycle combination truck that Josh spoke of is not a Vactor. It is a Bucher recycler unit. Vactor is a name brand.
Well, we look forward to learning in person at the next meeting. Big trucks are always fun for children and us. So, yes, please. Thank you so much. With that, I think, Mr. Hamilton, you're up. Contract services for water rate study.
Yes, thank you, Chair Burney, Commissioners, Councilmember Sneddon, Malcolm Hamilton, Administrative Analyst, and I'll be working as the project manager for the wastewater rate study adoption process. Water, of course. I just finished wastewater. Now moving on to water. If you can imagine, we're already on the third year of a 3-year adoption schedule. These rates that we have in place will be effective through June 30th of next year. So today is really our first stop in getting the water rate study kicked off and awarding the contract. Quickly looking at our selection process, it was a competitive process. We did a request for proposals. We evaluated 5 proposals. We went into interviews with the top 3 of those proposals. We had a fairly diverse staff team do the interviews. Out of that came a composite ranking, and HDR Engineering, if you remember, they did our wastewater rates, came out on top, and so we've selected them to move forward. Briefly, the scope of services we're looking at, of course, is the rate study component. In the staff report that was provided to you, it said we were looking at about a 3 to 5 year rate adoption schedule. The more we look at some of the dynamic factors, and I'll get into those in the next slide, we're going to most likely be proposing a 3-year adoption schedule. Of course, also are the 3 main components of a rate study: the revenue requirement, which is how much do you need for your operations and ongoing costs and capital program; the cost of service analysis. This ensures there's no cross-class subsidies, and it apportions all the costs to the different classes. And finally, the rate design is how you're going to collect those, and what's the structure of those rate classes. Also, they'll be doing a final report. I'll talk about the schedule as well a little bit later, but in the wastewater study, we took away from that a desire from the public and particularly the commercial class to see that rate report when the notice goes out, so giving them as much time as possible. And so we're going to try to expedite that and have those come out together. Finally, there's a public outreach component. We anticipate right now that HDR will be coming to Water Commission 3 times. We'll go to Finance Committee after that, and then we'll go to City Council for a public hearing. Just like wastewater, again, we're doing a 10-year financial plan. That will just ensure that our rates are on a trajectory to have us meet all our financial requirements, but over a longer planning period than the 3 years for the adoption. And finally, what we've added originally as an optional task, but we will be moving forward with this, is a study of rate relief programs. And so looking at different components of how do you fund these programs, who's eligible, what are the qualifications, and what kind of benefits can you provide. There's a push at the state level. There are rate relief programs in effect, and we think we're at a period of time where we can really look into that and see how we can assist our ratepayers. So these are our key focus areas. I think first and foremost in my mind, and I'll turn this over to Joshua in just a minute, but is the water demand and conservation. It's kind of 2 sides of the same coin. But as I mentioned in the staff report, our conservation levels, which is great, are still remaining very high, hovering, I think, around the 30% mark. When I look at water rates from the financial side, of course, if you have high levels of conservation, that is an immediate upward pressure on your rates. When discretionary water use kind of rebounds, some of those operating costs are allocated to them, and that takes some of the pressure off of maybe low water users. And we're just going to be battling that a little bit as we go into this. Secondly, and Joshua, do you want to jump in on the water distribution?
So just to kind of wrap up on that too, I mean, the current rate model that we had assumed some rebounding of water usage, which we have not seen. And that has manifested itself in about a $2 to $3 million revenue shortfall last year, and right now we're kind of tracking to see something similar. So to that, we have to address at least that discrepancy to start off with. But we do have some new kind of rate projections or conservation projections now that we can talk about when we bring this back in December. So more to come on that. Water distribution infrastructure plan. So we're working on that. We'll be hoping to wrap that up before the end of the year. And this is something that, to be honest with you, as you may recall, I was an engineering manager for a while for water resources, something I wanted to do probably 12 years ago, and we had been talking about it, and drought kind of delayed this. But actually sitting down and looking at a long-range plan for the distribution system, we have our forefathers designed our water system with a lot of capacity in it. We probably have more reservoirs than we need, given that right now we're really focused on water quality, and that means turning over water. And then, of course, we've seen conservation. We have water usage now that's equivalent to where we were in the 1950s. So with those two factors, what do we really need in the form of a distribution system? Both the reservoirs, the pump stations, and piping. And then what do we project we're going to need in 2050? And so this plan, which is going to come to an end here at the end of the year, will have some of the kind of lay out that plan along with some cost projections to support that. And so we're hoping to, of course, bring that at least into this model. It'll impact the 10-year forecast. So, and then the water supply agreement with Montecito is also a big question mark out there. The current timing of that, still waiting for Montecito. I mean, we're still working on the agreement. That's still full steam ahead. But I think the big public visual will be when they start to talk about rates. I am told there's going to be some discussion starting in November. They're hoping to notice their customers in January, and their message to me is they're hoping to be in a position to have their public hearing and also entertain the water sales agreement in March. So that will have a significant impact on our rate structure as we look forward. So we'll be taking a look at that. And then Malcolm can talk a little about that.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua. I think just the only thing I'd add there is the water supply agreement may require some cash outflows upfront from the city. Of course, over the long term, it is poised to be a benefit to the city's ratepayers and a fair deal, but that's something we're acknowledging in this rate study. Our current rate model is very good, I'd say. It's highly defensible. It's been worked over for several years, and it's got a lot of good aspects to it. The one area that we're looking at is the commercial customer classes. Right now, it's on a tiered water budget structure. So the first tier is a budget based on your type of business, and then the second structure is just a flat rate for continued usage. The commercial class doesn't typically have as much opportunity as residential to save water. So when you look at a tiered structure that encourages that, we're looking at potentially just having a uniform rate for this class and seeing what that will do. We're going to ask HDR to look at industry trends and what other municipalities are doing. But that's one area we know up front that we'll be asking them to look at. And then lastly, of course, is always the financial health of the water utility, so making sure that we have adequate reserves, meeting operating costs, meeting the ongoing capital maintenance and regular capital projects, and meeting our kind of debt coverage, debt requirements. So as Mr. Hagmark had mentioned, if you look at this schedule and starting at the top, we're kind of looking at these four components: the rate study, the financial plan, the report, public outreach, and then the rate relief program. It's all structured to terminate roughly in September. So typically our water and wastewater rate schedules is adopting, going to the public hearing in June and having them in place on July 1st. We don't think that's really prudent given all of the variability with the water supply agreement with some of these demand concerns. So we are pushing this out right now in our intended schedule. So if you kind of go down to the second last line, is having a public hearing in September. That will give us more insight into our demand. We'll know whether or not we have a water supply agreement. We'll know exactly what those terms are. We can model those financially very well at that point. And then ultimately, customers would see the new rates on their bills in October and November. Initially, we had potentially considered delaying this even further out into the next fiscal year and maybe taking a year off. But with the way rates have gone right now and some of that lag in our rate revenue, we don't think that's going to be possible. And then finally, once we're complete with the rate study, we've done the public hearing, we're going to turn our attention to this study of rate relief programs. The scope as it is right now is HDR would deliver somewhat of a technical memorandum, a survey of what other agencies are doing, and what it would take for Santa Barbara. So the recommendation before you today is to authorize the Public Works Director to execute a contract with HDR. We have a base contract amount of $129,855, and then we've added in a 10% extra services, $12,985.
Great. Thank you so much. Questions? Comments?
Quick one. So is staff for drinking water, is that part of cost of service?
Yes.
Okay, so you take me to a conference, and then I get to come back with all these ideas. So I'm just wondering, when do you actually start to have a conversation on having a PIO, a marketing person, a PR person, and justifying that within the water structure, the financial structure? So right now, just I think everybody does a great job, but they do a great job within their frame of reference. You have professional staff trying to serve that function, and either that's not in their skill set necessarily as well as they do. It's taking away from other things. At what point does the messaging become that important that you would have a position or maybe a hybrid position with conservation, and it's actually a person who does that for a living?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I think it's finally risen to that level where Public Works has someone now. They hired Ayers and Associates to represent Public Works, and so to have a unified message from Public Works. Again, some of that message is a little different for water resources, but I think we've been leveraging Katz and Associates. We hadn't gotten to the point about talking about whether or not at some point it becomes more efficient to have some internal staff, but I think this is always a good talking point. There's always opportunities for us to improve on that, and I think as we go through, we heard some more today on SLIP and how we can improve that education, more videos. We do contract with City TV to have them do a certain amount of videos for us every year, so we certainly going to have them do some more. You may have saw the video we sent out related to the secondary aeration project. That was something that they did for us and kind of satisfied two different issues, but one was the loan requirements that we had to do. But I think we're always looking to expand, and I don't know, we could create, I'm open to an ad hoc group to talk about outreach.
This little subcommittee would not be the method to work that into this particular study?
We could.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
No,
right.
absolutely.
So it'd just be,
yeah.
if there's
The
traction
rate-
for that, that's where it would happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can talk more about what that would look like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And if I may add, Chair Bernie, Commissioner Jordan, the wastewater fund, the water fund is fairly large. And so when you look at, by no means does something that's not included in the cost of service can still be added to our operations like a position. Oftentimes, though, it will translate to more use of your reserves. If we have some reserves above our council policy, then that's something we could do in a mid-cycle without adjusting the rate model.
Just clear to me that, is there a quicker way to accomplish what we're accomplishing slowly now, just kind of pummeling it with a hammer because we're not PR professionals, right? And so it's so like, I'm hesitant to say it's another position, but I'm all for adding the quicker into the accomplishment that somebody who functioned in that area just went at it and was yours, that kind of thing. So I just, you see the grief on Nextdoor, you see the pushback from special interest groups on some of these things like the SLIP, and I think it's just really a matter of the way you message. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? No? We are looking for a
Motion to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
okay. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-all. Thank you very much. On to that water rates ad hoc subcommittee.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bernie. Again, it's my understanding it's been the desire of the commission and staff as well to form ad hoc committees when we have special projects or certain issues that really you want to take a deep dive on. We thought this worked really well. In the wastewater rate study, we had a 2-person ad hoc from the commission. We were able to have a few meetings and really dig in and be as informed as possible. So we're recommending the same thing from the commission today. So you form a 2-person ad hoc committee. I think the estimate of time we put in there was we've planned for 3 meetings. They typically happen during normal business hours, and we schedule them for about an hour to an hour and a half. Of course, if the ad hoc wanted to meet more often, we could accommodate that, but that's what we plan for now.
Thank you very much. Do we have any volunteers? I have not been on a committee for a while, so I will volunteer.
I'll volunteer.
Okay. Good with everybody else? Okay, there we go. So you've got Dr. Keller and myself.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now on to Water Agency update with Ms. Taylor.
Yes. Ms. Taylor and I are going to tag team this one. So I'm going to start off with CCWA and just talk about some of the issues that have been going on there. So we'll start off with state water deliveries. As you know, we've been cut off from the state water system now for a while, unable to make deliveries to the lake because of the entanglement of doing fish releases and getting water into the lake. So CCWA has been working on it. They have got an approval route plan now from the Bureau of Reclamation. They are now waiting on some last-minute parts that will allow them to actually take a pipeline up and over the dam and drop in on the other side. So as you may remember, during the drought, they opened up one of the gates, and we had a pipeline that went through one of the spill gates, and so we needed to get out of there, especially given how close potentially we could be to spilling. Have this ability back, which will be helpful. And looks like it's kind of a longer term plan until we can figure out what else to do with the headworks of the dam and the bottleneck of doing fish releases. That kind of ties also to the barge, which Kathy will report on, the barge in the lake that is supposed to pump water over to Hilton Creek. The Delta Conveyance Project. Oh, yes.
Just a quick question. What's their time frame? I mean, this has already been
Oh,
for a while.
thank you. Yes, they anticipate having it done before the end of the year. Yeah. And one of the things that's been interesting is La Cumbra has been the one most hit by this because they don't have any Cachuma water, but they do rely on state water, particularly to fulfill the needs of a portion of their community that they can't really get groundwater into. And so we've actually been doing exchanges with them to try and satisfy their needs. And so that's been kind of been limping along. Delta Conveyance. Right now, it appears that most of the CCWA members are going to reject participation in the Delta Conveyance Project. And so it looks like we're going that way, but we haven't heard from all of the CCWA members. The timeline to get back to DWR has slipped out, so we do have a little more time, and part of that is they're still working on an agreement in principle as to what you'd be agreeing to in this first part of funding design and environmental that's ongoing. We're watching that closely because there is some things that are evolving with that may be a disadvantage to us. So if something significant comes out of that, I will be coming back. I don't, at this point, haven't seen anything that would require us to revisit that vote. But for example, one of the things that we've talked about, Article 21 water, that's water made available to all state water contractors in the event that San Luis is full, they're pumping out of the Delta, and there is no place to put it. They make water available, you just have to pay the transportation costs. One of the things that's kind of making its way into this agreement is that unless you participate in the Delta Conveyance Project, you would not be eligible for any of that Article 21 water. So we're fighting hard to say, hey, we bought into Tableway. We should be considered AAA rated. We are the dominant ones here, and as Delta Conveyance people should not be taking priority now over our rights in the system. Same thing seems to also be coming about related to San Luis Reservoir. Interesting twist of events is that right now San Luis Reservoir is projected to spill every 10 years, roughly. With the Delta Conveyance Project, there would be the ability to move more water. And with that, the anticipation that the San Luis reservoirs could spill, these again are paper spills every other year. And so that could, and since if we're not participating in the Delta Conveyance Project, that could have an impact to us because we like to conserve water in the reservoir for planned use, and so that could have a negative impact to us. So again, we're following these to see their Ray Stokes, the executive director, has been fighting hard for equality on this issue, but one of the things that I do have to point out, we are right now on track to be the only urban water supplier, state water contractor, that is not going to participate in the Delta Conveyance Project. So we, by default, will be kind of odd ducks. It'll be us and some of the ag users in the Central Valley, Kern County, who just can't afford to participate. So we're at a minority vote, and so that's not necessarily a great place to be. But I will keep bringing back stuff as it unfolds on that matter. And it is my understanding that Ray Stokes is going to be working to bring the reassignment of the state water contract to the County Board of Supervisors. I think he was pushing to try and bring it back before the end of the year. I haven't got a date, but once I get a date, I will share that with you. I think it's still... I haven't got any confirmation from any of the Board of Supervisors yet. It still seems to be pretty split. So hopefully we'll be successful at getting that reassigned. I know a lot of the concerns that they raised have been addressed or are being addressed. So concern about voting and concern about, what was the other one then? Voting and liability. What kind of liability the county would have in transferring it. I think a lot of those have been addressed. And with that, I'll turn that over to Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to add, Joshua touched on the state water into the lake. The barge is currently down, and they're working on trying to repair that. However, they're also working on a bypass solution that should be done by the end of the year. But keep in mind, between November 1st and 18th, the state water project is going to be down for maintenance anyway, so we would not be getting deliveries during that time. So that's any kind of concession, hopefully. Other activities with COMB is they're working on the secured pipeline project. That's the secured pipeline that would be between the intake tower and the barge. You know, what we've done before is it's been kind of floating on these poles and goes up and down with the lake, and it's rather cumbersome to the recreational boaters, and if the lake comes up too fast, we have problems. You know, we have problems when it goes up too fast, and when it, the lake goes down. So the secured pipeline project would be a great solution. And they're working on COMB is working on the environmental issues and the feasibility study. So that would be studied. It's followed by a design.
Just to clarify, we know there's two different barges here. One's the
yes,
Hilton Creek watering barge, and then there's the
emergency pumper. Mm-hmm. And then for CCRB, the water rights order, we're going to give you a presentation in November on that. So stay tuned. Mm-hmm. And just miscellaneous items. Up at Twitchell Dam, they plan on doing some cloud seeding, but we do not plan on doing any cloud seeding because our watershed is still recovering from the fires, and it just could create more mess and damage than useful benefit. And that is my update for those agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions on those? No? Okay. Subcommittee reports, I believe.
Only thing is sea level rise. Nothing's really changed since last month. We've have a meeting coming up, I think, on the 22nd, and we're going to meet essentially every 2 weeks into December, talking about issues and educating ourselves to the issues coming out of the adaptation plan, and then the adaptation plan to be released sometime at the end of December, early January, I believe. When that's done, part of that presentation to the community, we're hopefully they're going to come here and talk to us at the Water Commission about the effects upon water and wastewater structures down on the waterfront. So we should have our own presentation sometime in the spring.
Commissioner Davis, we really appreciate your participation in that, and just to drive home, it is showing up in all of our permits. It is showing up in every one of our loans, grants, and what's challenging, I think, for most of those is they want us to lay out specifically what our plan is for the utility.
Yep.
And my answer back is, we are working on this as a community, and I think it would be, destructive to have the utility working on something out of sync with the community's plan. I mean, ultimately, we're going to come up with something that reflects all of, what's going to work for the whole community. And I think there's a lot of different options on the table. And so to that extent, that's the battle that I'm fighting. We recently were doing our NPDS permit renewal, and they were wanting me to put in specific dates when we were going to deliver, our basically our plan to at 2 feet of sea level rise, we are going to retreat and do this and this and this, and kept pushing back that we're not to that point. We are working on that.
The complicating factor for us, I think, is we have not seen the adaptation plan draft yet, and we won't until the end of the year. The water and wastewater section is so complicated. I think the recommendations are going to be further study, right? And so your issue in terms of you're even going to have a goalpost moved even a little bit farther down. So we're going to continue to struggle with that.
Yeah. I mean, because a lot of, I think what we talked about is that it really, what we do as a utility really depends on what the community is doing. If a community has decided that we're going to stay, for example, on Cabrillo, then there's a plan that we come up with. If our plan is to retreat or whatever we decide to do, then our utility plan is obviously very different. So I think it's that iterative process that it's going to take a little more time, but I think at the end of the day it'll be a more comprehensive.
And you lay on top of that what's going to be acceptable to the state at the Coastal Commission level. Councilmember Snedden and I have been following what's happening. I think it's Del Mar.
Del Mar, yes.
Right, and they had a hearing scheduled for just this month, which they've postponed, where there's communities basically saying protect everything, essentially, and the Coast Commission is saying no. Here we're going to lay out exactly thresholds for when you need to act, and we need to see what that schedule is: 2 feet, 3 feet, etc. And so the administrator, if you will, the legal structure on communities moving forward is uncertain also at the present time. So,
I appreciate you, Councilmember Snedden, sharing that. That is a microcosm of exactly, it's a small community. I think the whole community is in the coastal commission or coastal zone. But it really is the microcosm of how do you talk about is inverse condemnation. I mean, if you're sitting there coming up with a plan that says these properties are no longer inhabitable, it really has a huge ramification as to the value of this property. And not to say that it's right or wrong, I'm just saying it has. How do you begin to put that out there without the normal legal issues that would normally come about if I were to say that property is not going to be habitable in 30 years or whatever? It's big issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, item 8, discussion item, capturing Water Commission's comments and recommendations to City Council. And,
yes. Madam Chair, I've been working closely with Commissioner Davis to try and capture some of the Commission's desires to be able to get your feedback into our council agenda process, staff reports to council. And so we had initially had some language in here that that we had talked about at the work session in August, and then was subsequently adopted as part of the meeting minutes in September. And we're having issues implementing some of that, so we brought it back with some clarifications. And again, I hope that these clarifications will work for the commission, and we're still working through those issues internally to the city. As you may or may not know, it takes about 3 weeks for us to get to council with an item, and so navigating or coordinating that with Water Commission and now with this proposed plan here, what we're going to do is just build in another week after Water Commission, so not next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday when we try to plan our council meetings so that we have the time to insert into our staff reports the motion of the Water Commission. That's what we tried to capture in here. In those situations, because they do come up where we do not have that freedom and we need to get to council on this next Tuesday, I've committed here to sending an email to council with your motion in it. I will try and stay away from trying to capture your comments because I just don't think I don't think I could be fair or to those. I will try and I will put in the motion and certainly highly encourage the commission to come speak to the council on items that you feel like you want to drive home a point. So with that, if there are any additional edits to these, I'm happy to entertain those.
Madam Chair, I just want to compliment staff on working to implement what we asked. I for one was one of the people who spoke up at the work session on these items, and not only have you captured it, but I think you've worked through the administrative hurdles that you have in terms of the CAR reports, and I just want to compliment you on what you finished. Right? There is everything from breaking out, and if you go back and look at let's just say the contract for water services, our recommendation is kind of squeezed in between a contract discussion and the end of the report, and breaking that out into a separate section would allow council to see much easier what we did. So I really like the formatting in that regard. On the moving our motions forward, the one thing it will require us to do, or at least I would suggest that we do, that in our motions where we have something different than what's being recommended by staff, that we basically put the finding or reasons in the motion, right? We're recommending approval for reasons A, B, and C. That helps staff basically capture those things in the record, and it'll be easily then to transfer on to council in that regard. So again, I just really want to compliment staff on what they've come up with. I think it's going to help everybody in the process, so thank you.
Comments? I'll also second that. Thank you very much for the time, and Dave, you as well. I know you put some extra time in this, so thank you very much for...
Just for the record, at one point I really jumped all over Joshua on an issue, and it was a kicking the dog type of situation, and I apologized afterwards, and all I could say is, like, if that's what it takes to get this kind of work, good job.
Okay. With that, we will go on to our final item, Water Resources Manager's Report. Joshua.
All right. I keep wanting to understand how the commission wants to handle this in the future, this particular report. Are you fine with receiving this report? I know I've looked back at kind of historically, and sometimes it was just handed out, and if there was any comments or questions, I'm of course happy to answer it. I also don't want to belabor something that I don't have anything of significance that I want to point out in here.
And, just for future reporting, I like the report. I like seeing the information. I don't think I need a detailed response. What I'd like to be, if staff has something which is jumped out, what you just said, something significant, right? You've got the report. Are there any questions? But staff is basically have items 1 or 2 that basically may be things that we should be paying attention to. Mm-hmm. That would help.
Okay. I think some of the stuff. One of the things that just stood out to me was just the recycled water production. Again, that blend water is not because of a water quality issue, but because of the pipe breaks that we keep having down there. And we've met with our consultant who's working on the design to fix that. We have put in their schedule that we want there to be a short-term fix, which means by next summer they have something that we can institute that's going to at least put a halt to this. We actually just had a break this morning on it again. And then if there's a longer-term solution, so be it. But we want to get something in there to keep our staff safe and, of course, keep the facility operating at that level.
Madam Chair.
Member Stead.
Can I just add to that? Is this packet available online for the public?
After the meeting is posted, yes.
Because I do think there's value, even if it's quickly, for some of the charts to be visible during the meeting. So even if there's no change, a lot of times people will just go to the last meeting to see this type of data of how we're doing.
Yes, it gets posted after the meeting. It'll be up there. We will be coming, as I maybe mentioned earlier, we'll be coming back next month to do our biannual update on our water supply plan. So we're taking a look, and we've got a few things we're wrestling with, but one of it is in that long-range planning. If Montecito is part of that, how do we show that? I'm not kind of that delicate balance of I'm not trying to show that our city demands are increasing, but how that it's demonstrated on the graphic that we typically have showing our water supply planning. So looking for ways to depict that, but then also kind of lay out, where we're headed and what we project out for conservation. So that'll be an item for next month.
We can also, I'm not sure that it makes sense to include all of the groundwater basin levels going back to 1980. Is that really showing us a lot? Like, if we're going to have, we can talk about this, but like, if we're going to have those, I'd rather know what they are now and more detail.
What we could do, what I would recommend doing this is we have a semi-annual or annual discussion on this, and that would probably be more productive.
Yeah.
Rather than including them in here, and we can save some paper. What I have asked, and hopefully you'll see it next month, I have asked for more wastewater updates. Like, I'd like to see more just dashboard type stuff, like where we are with spills again, that kind of fell out of here. Maybe energy production, things of that nature that we're tracking, and I'm trying to, I don't want it to become a work pill, but it's stuff that I hope we can glean now out of our databases and pull into a report that would be pretty helpful to the commission and the public, just kind of a status. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Actually, I would say on the Gibraltar Reservoir, it'd be nice to see a maybe more detailed snapshot of the current level, because same thing with, we're going back so far on this thing.
Yeah.
You can't really see where it actually is today because it's so squished.
The font's gotten so small.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just this particular table, it's useful to see the numbers because some of them are small, but it'd be better to have it graphical. And then maybe someone wants to consult the actual numbers, they can go online, because I think graphical would stand out a lot more.
Projected versus actual.
Yeah, projected versus actual for the various components, because, I think a visual graphical would be much more
Easier to see the change.
Yes, right.
So no promise I'll get this one changed for November, but we'll start work on that.
And I like the idea basically of quarterly or semi-annually on some of those other things, like what Megan was talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can work on that.
Madam Chair, I have one last comment. A couple meetings ago or a meeting ago, I asked about lead and copper testing, and you sent out a memo to us in that regard. Really good memo. I've just got to say, one, thank you for responding to the question, but the memo was actually, really spot on in terms of both the issue and what you do and the fact that we are doing really what's necessary to basically meet the law and then some. So thank you, everybody who worked on that one. That was a really good report.
Thank you, Galen, for helping put that together. As I mentioned, maybe didn't mention earlier, I was going to have Galen Fair come back and provide an update on PFAS. That seems to be showing up in a lot of news articles and concerns about it, and wanting to put that in perspective, because some of the numbers they're throwing out there of, 70 parts per trillion posing potential health issues. It's an incredibly small amount of material. And so have her come back and just kind of provide an overview of what it is and where we are with our various supplies. And hopefully we can talk about how we want to get that information out to the public as well, to kind of help bring down any concerns there are. Okay.
Anything else? No? Okay, our next meeting is Thursday, November 21st, and hopefully we will have the truck that's name I can't remember that Brad mentioned.
Me neither. The Vector truck.
It's not the Vector truck. It is not the truck that is not a Vector truck.
Formerly known as the Vector.
Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much, everybody.